everyone for joining us this evening for the opening night of the Vancouver International Mountain Film Festival presented by Arterix. My name is Ben Miller. I will be your moderator this evening. So once again, thank you so much for joining this incredibly important discussion labeled Mental Health in the Mountains. So want to just quickly acknowledge Creative BC as well as Arterix for their generous support of this year's live panels and workshops, helping make tonight happen. Quick introduction of myself. As I mentioned, my name is Ben Miller. I am the co-founder of Worth Hats, and I'm honored to be a part of this panel this evening and moderating it. Worth Hats is a legacy project from my friend Jacob Worth that was started in 2018. Jacob passed by suicide, and since that time we sell hats to pay for counseling and therapy. So the mission of Worth Hats is to break down the stigma around counseling and therapy and help pay for those who would otherwise be unable to afford. To date, we've sponsored more than 4,000 plus counseling sessions. And to learn more about Worth Hats and the story, just go to worthhats.com. I want to give a quick land acknowledgement. Right now, I'm on the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nation. Wherever you're enjoying this virtual VIMFF festival, we encourage you to explore the ancestral roots of the lands which you work and play. And together we can help preserve these mountains and waters for future generations. So once again, thanks everyone for joining for the opening night of the festival, and specifically this panel. This is such an incredibly important conversation, and I really want to acknowledge VIMFF for making this happen. I think if this was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we wouldn't be seeing a festival with a mental health panel, and it just shows how important it is to be having these conversations, and specifically within the outdoor community and the sports that we love. And so tonight you're going to hear a variety of insights and thoughts around mental health in the mountains and in the sports communities that we spend time in. And throughout this conversation, feel free to ask questions, but put them in the chat and we'll get to the questions at the end. So the last 15 minutes we'll save for questions at the end. But as questions come up, just put it in the chat and we'll record it and keep it for the end. Right now, we're going to share some resources for anyone. It is incredibly important to reach out if any of us are struggling, and that goes for obviously ourselves and the people around us. Sometimes, we can struggle and we don't know really where to reach out to. And so here is a slide for anyone to just check out. You can, again, when things like this come up, even taking a picture, taking a note, because we may be fine now, we may be feeling great in this moment, but we never know what in a month's time, in a year's time, and it could or when a friend may be having an issue, we can go back to the slide and send it to them and encourage them to seek help. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our panelists. I'm incredibly excited to be introducing an amazing group of panelists with Harvey Wright, Sarah Hornby, Patrick Vaughn, and Dr. Colleen Froese. They will introduce themselves in a second, just share a few words. Harvey, Sarah, and Patrick all have incredible films in this festival, and I encourage you, if you haven't had a chance, and most likely you haven't, check them out. It's very, very impactful, moving pieces by all three of them. So with Crux, Choosing to Live, and Confessions of a Runner. So I'll pass it over to first to Harvey, just for a quick introduction of himself, and then Sarah, Patrick, and followed by Colleen. So over to Harvey for a quick introduction. You might be on mute, Harvey.
Classic, forgot to unmute. Hey, everybody. Good to see you all. My name is Harvey. I'm the subject of a documentary called Crux that kind of profiles my story over the course of my life. through struggles with addiction and depression, and told through the story of rock climbing. That's been a transformative activity in my life lately. So very grateful to be here. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Harvey. Over to Sarah.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Sarah Hornby. I live in Canmore, Alberta. The film I'm in is Choosing to Live, which follows me on a series of bikepacking trips throughout the Canadian Rockies in 2019 that I took on shortly after the death of my husband.
Thanks, Sarah. Over to Patrick.
Hi, my name is Patrick Vaughn. I live in Washington, D.C. I'm the subject of the film Confessions of a Runner. And the film follows me running close to 300 miles across Lebanon, and sort of tells the story of my sort of healing and redemption from, physical and addiction challenges. So I'm excited to be on the panel with these guys.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. Over to Colleen.
Hi, I'm a psychiatrist. I've been working for about 30 years now at the UBC Sleep Disorders Clinic. I also do outreach psychiatry up north to Terrace, BC, which is my hometown. And I kind of fell into this by accident, sort of. I worked a long time ago with Casey's father, and he phoned me up one day and asked, would you like to be in a movie? My son's making a movie. It's about rock climbing and addictions. And I said, I don't know anything about rock climbing. He said, that's okay. It doesn't matter. I said, well, I don't know much about addictions either. That's okay. You'll do. So Casey contacted me, and him and Zach came and interviewed me for an hour. And it was a very interesting experience, not knowing what they wanted me to say. But I'm really happy to be here today. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Colleen. And it's so great to have a professional such as yourself a part of this and to give that expertise. So thank you again for joining. Before we get into the questions, we're gonna show a little introduction of the three films. So Dylan, if you could share that would be great.
The time that I spend in the mountains is it's like a religious experience for me. It's brought a certain discipline and a way to connect with the universe and to bond with other people.
When I'm laying in bed, there's no apparent danger in my life, or if I'm at home alone, or there's really nothing to be anxious about. And so it's difficult because you don't know what's happening to you, and it sucks. At least if you're climbing, you know what's happening to you. You know why you're scared.
But there's no guidebook for that. How to face death together.
What I found was a little bit just that I had numbed myself to a lot of things for a long time, and I had to face them.
Mental health is first about learning how to tolerate yourself and the difficulties of life, and then furthermore not only be able to tolerate those things, but to be able to love those things and meet those things with an open heart.
All of it, even the pain and sadness, it's what's brought me to this beautiful, fleeting, fragile, hopeful life.
Incredibly excited to have this group of individuals a part of this panel, and as soon as you can, check out Croc's Choosing to Live and the Confessions of a Runner. So we're gonna get into our first question here, and we're gonna the first question is gonna be a little more broad and a little more just around nature and our mental health and the impact that nature can have. And so this is specifically for Colleen. just kind of share a bit of insight. And it's, how does surrounding ourselves in nature over an urbanized environment impact our mental health? So again, that's, how does surrounding ourselves in nature over an urbanized environment impact our mental health?
Great question, Ben. I don't want to dismiss the urban environment first, though, because we can't all get out into nature every day. And we do need to get outside, because getting good exposure to natural daylight is important for our circadian rhythm, our biological clock. So even if you have a balcony or a backyard or a neighborhood urban environment, by all means get outside every day. But also I want to give a shout out to all the search and rescue people that have been working overtime this last year to rescue people who have decided to get out into the mountains and have had trouble because they haven't been prepared. So if you're going to get out into nature, make a plan, be prepared, go with someone, and leave a note or let somebody know when you're expected to be back. So if you can get outside, and hopefully you do as often as you can, there are so many health benefits that this has been studied for several years now. Back in the 80s, it became popular in Japan, and they call it forest bathing or Shinroku. And the benefits are extreme, like it helps with your cardiovascular system, it lowers your blood pressure, it reduces your heart rate. It can also improve your immune system, so thereby preventing infections and perhaps even preventing cancer. It can help your respiratory system. You have better oxygen flow to your lungs, and so you're going to breathe better. The number of benefits are numerous and can mainly affect both the physiological and the psychological components. So being in nature helps reduce anxiety and depression. If anybody has got children with ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, getting them out in nature is going to be wonderful in terms of all the things that there are to explore. There's new smells, there's cedar and pine and lavender and all those things that are great to stimulate the senses and get you into nature. But there's also some research that says that even just watching films or video connect people with nature and you have some benefit. So hopefully that's what we're all going to be doing over the next week, is watching these movies at the film festival and advertising that to all our friends to be able to get the same kind of health benefits.
Amazing. Thanks so much for that, Colleen. And I think you bring up too such an important point of, you know, we can get, when we think of nature and the outdoors, again, we can think of these grand, you know, these grand views and these, you know, beautiful forests, and it really is all around us. And it's just to, even if you are in a city, just recognizing where those spaces are and just and connecting with them in some way. Awesome. So I'm gonna bring it over to Harvey, Sarah, and Patrick, and I want to kind of talk. All three of you are connected to different communities with the sports that you interact with, and I want to ask just where you think we are. So where are we when it comes to normalizing our mental health? Where do you believe we are when it comes to normalizing our mental health, specifically within the communities that you're most connected with? So where are we when it comes to normalizing our mental health, specifically within the communities that you're most connected with? So I'm going to start with Harvey, and then we'll move over to Sarah and Patrick.
Yeah, I think we're starting to get to a good place. I mean, at least within the climbing community, I've been very lucky to be surrounded with very open and honest and helpful people. I think maybe with climbing, there's a little bit of vulnerability, you know, built right into the sport, because you're having to trust a partner, you're going out on, you know, some pretty scary things sometimes. So it's been a place where I've felt it to be a safe place for me to talk about certain things. That being said, though, I think, I mean, even within myself, there's still so much misunderstanding I have about even my own condition or whatever it is that I'm struggling with, and about others too. And it's so it's good to continue to be open and talking as much as you can. But I think the climbing community has been pretty good for it, and I think there's a lot more material in forms of writing and podcasts within the climbing community that do speak quite a lot about mental health. It's something that's becoming, I feel like, quite built into the sport itself.
Awesome, man. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Harvey. Sarah.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Harvey said. I think is similar in the cycling community also. You are hearing and seeing more and more of that conversation open up, whether it's online or podcasts or in writing. You know, I do still think we have a long way to go, and sometimes those discussions seem to happen in kind of isolated pockets. And of course, with social media, I think we still see a lot of like the highlight reels. So I do think we still have a long way to go, but in cycling and bikepacking, I think a lot of people, or some people, turn to those kinds of adventures, often with mental health struggles, and that's what brings them into it. So yeah, similar to what Harvey said, I think it's a very open community in that regard, but I think we can always do more.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And I think you touched on a question that I'll bring up a little bit later of, you know, those places that we go to when we are struggling. So thank you. Patrick, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, not to just reiterate what the other two have said, I think in all of our sports, there's certainly a more accepting community to mental health and you know, addiction and the type of challenges that people face that I think draws them to this kind of, you know, the kind of sports that we do. For me personally, with ultra running, it's a lot of hours. there's many hours that you're sort of alone in the woods or alone with another person or one or two other people. And you're sort of, you know, and I'm sure it's the same in everybody's sport. You're planning a lot of your life around, you know, those activities. And so I was fortunate in that some of the first people that I opened up to about my background were people that I found in the ultra running community that told me their, you know, version of my story before I had to, you know, tell mine, I guess. So I find it very, you know, like a really supportive community in all of these sports. And for me, ultra running is sort of the one that's worked for me, but I think it is sort of the nature of all of them, that people are open-minded to other people's struggles, I guess.
Yeah, thanks for that, Patrick. And we'll get a bit more into some of those specifics as well here. I just want to let everyone know too, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And the last 15 minutes of the panel, we will get into any questions that you have. So any questions, put in the chat, and we'll address them later on. So kind of connecting to that a little bit, but I just want for each of you to kind of just share, what is it that you find so uplifting about your sport? What is it about your sport that, you know, keeps you going and you know, it's continuously in the back of your mind that you want to continue to do it? And what is it that it gives you? So let's start with Patrick, and then Harvey, and Sarah.
For me, I think it's probably, I mean, one, of course, is the time I get to spend in nature in the mountains, which is sort of meditative for me. But it's the sense of accomplishment. You know, when I was at my worst points, I really didn't have much self-esteem, and I may have projected otherwise, but I didn't really feel confident about myself in any way. And the first time I finished an ultra marathon, and then another one, and started pushing the distance further and further, it was really empowering. I guess it really made it seem like, hey, I can do anything if I just sort of dedicate the amount of time and energy that it takes to be successful at it.
Yeah, and for me, it's the possibilities. I mean, there's so many places around the world that are just incredible venues for climbing, and I can look through a guidebook and look at these wild places and just go like, wow, maybe I could go there, and like, I wonder what that experience is going to be like. So it's this huge, open set of possibility for experience, and all kinds of experience. It could be totally shitty or really great or everything in between, and I think also it's there is that feeling of having survived something, that usually when I come out of something, there's a sense of ease that necessarily wasn't there before. On my typical day-to-day, I can be just a huge ball of anxiety and confusion and doubt and whatever. But coming back from even just a single day climbing, like nothing major, nothing crazy, things feel a little bit softer and a little clearer. And I think it's because, throughout the experience of whatever that day was, I've been able to just feel what I need to in the moment. And, you come back into the city and the grass is a little bit greener, and your job feels a little bit better, and all of the simple things kind of just feel a little bit sweeter because, you've kind of maybe gone and done something that's scary or difficult, or yeah, that's what keeps me coming back.
Sweet. Some Harvey, thanks.
Yeah, I totally relate to both what Patrick and Harvey said. And yeah, I think it's a combination of things for me with bikepacking: the physical challenge, being in nature, exploring new places, like Harvey said, the possibilities that it opens up, kind of like the wanderlust of all the places you could go. When we have the opportunity, it's connecting with friends. I find on these kinds of adventures, you just connect with people, even if you've maybe haven't even hung out with them before, and then all of a sudden you're thrown in a trip together. There's just a really special, unique kind of bonding I find that happens with people when you're kind of riding the highs and lows of an adventure. Yeah, and just I think the uncomplicated nature of life when you're kind of out in the mountains, it just strips everything else away, and you're just very in the moment. So, yeah.
Amazing. Great. Thank you. And so, with that, I want to kind of put it a bit onto the three of your films, and just, take a moment. Again, a lot of people who are on here haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but it can take a lot of courage and vulnerability to share our stories, and to not be ashamed of our struggles that we've experienced. And so I would love for you just to give a bit of advice to others who are struggling and scared to open up, and just what inspired you to share your story? What was it that inspired you to share? So let's hear from Harvey first.
Well, somebody told me that it would be a good story to share, and I agreed to it, and I mean, shame is a big thing in my life. It's made my life really hard at times. I think always when I'm able to just speak out loud about what I'm going through, and I hear the words coming out of my mouth, and I'm communicating with the human being in front of me, or, you know, it does seem to soften that shame. Because I think that, you know, where I struggle the most is with my own internal dialogue, that internal voice that's just really mean. And when I share about it, sometimes it can sound ridiculous, and then I can chuckle at myself, or sometimes, you know, I can really hear in my own self that that I am looking for acceptance and compassion from somebody else and from myself. And that can, I think, compassion and acceptance is a really good antidote to shame. With addiction, it's really hard because, you know, I'm still even learning a lot about it, and I think because of the nature of things that happen when you're a drug addict or an alcoholic, it is really hard to not blame yourself for being that way. And blame is the rabbit's foot of shame, you know, and you can go in these spirals of blame and shame, and kind of just, again, coming back to acceptance and compassion for the way things are. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. And it's easier to blame than to truly love something, or it's easier to, I mean, loving yourself when things are messy and when you're making mistakes is hard, but that's when you need it the most. You know, when I'm killing it, it's pretty easy to love myself, and I can do great things, and yay, everything's good. But, you know, when I'm not, or I'm down, it's a lot harder. And sharing about it has been, I mean, I never thought that I would be the subject of a documentary. And I don't know what my year would have been like if we weren't making this film. I mean, I was very in the space of sharing a lot and talking about what I was struggling with as it was happening. And I got a lot of support from people that if I didn't have that, I don't know where I would be. And, you know, I know how it feels too. Like, you don't necessarily, if you're going through a crisis, or you're having a panic attack or anxiety, like, you're not like, oh, I'm going to pick up the phone and start calling people and telling them all about this crisis I'm having right now. You know, I know it doesn't work that way. And at least for me, I can have like a 500-pound hand when I'm trying to pick up the phone. But the more I vocalize it, the less that shame voice is there. And I think by vocalizing it, it's a good reminder that, you know, the voice inside of our heads is often, you know, it can be false a lot of the times. And I think that it's always easier to give love to others and maybe not to yourself. But when you vocalize things with a partner, a friend, or whatever, you're, you know, reciprocating that loop, and you're not just in your own mind going da 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 da. Anyway, this is a bit of a long one, but
that was great, Harvey. Yeah,
thanks.
That was really great. Thanks, man. Yeah, really appreciate that share. Patrick, let's move over to you around what inspired you to share your story.
Yeah. I just have to give a lot of respect to Harvey, because he he shared the whole side of the story that I still refuse to share and talk about. Right, like I didn't let anybody see the under the covers that has displayed, in the film and just now and in general. And so I didn't tell anybody and didn't own up to what I was doing for years and years. And then even when I got over, I guess, when I stopped doing it and still didn't tell anybody, I still didn't feel any better about myself. And so it's really interesting. I went and did this run in Lebanon that's the subject of the film. And, for me, it was a little bit of a, feeling as if I had conquered the physical challenges that had restricted me and felt like I had already put the addiction behind me. And sharing the story was really when I finally put it behind me. And so it's really interesting. Sharing it all was sort of a secondary thing. We never set out to make a film. I went and did this thing, thinking that was sort of the triumph, I guess, if I'm going to be honest. And, 3 years later, I've been able to tell everybody in my life about something that I hid for 10 years from, my closest family.
And to just quick follow up, Pat, was there a moment though when you did it come out naturally through the film that you just, you could tell that's where it was a part of the story, and that's when you started to begin to kind of share?
It was over the course of the run that was about a week long, and the filmmaker Bashar, who's not here, he's in Beirut, he pried it out of me over a week. Basically, he just kept asking me more and more, like, what was making me do this and what was my driving motivation, and why, and I hid it. I wouldn't tell him for the whole week. I told him at the end of the week after, in the final interview, and then we went back and sort of produced the film out of the footage that we had after I sort of told the story.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. Sarah, what inspired you to share yours?
Yeah, I think for me, it wasn't like a specific moment or anything. It was probably just the realization that, at least in terms of grief, there is nothing unique or uncommon about my experience. It's something we all experience at some time in our lives. You can grieve about many different things, but ultimately just realizing that it's something we all go through. But yet, like mental health in general, it's still not something we talk a lot about. And although Choosing to Live, I think, is like a very hopeful film, I did welcome that chance to kind of open the discussion on death and grieving. And I would love, to see us get to a place where we can be more comfortable talking about those uncomfortable things.
Yeah, awesome. And Sarah, I'll stay with you for a sec, just kind of as it's a bit of a follow-up question. We all face grief at different times in our lives. None of us are immune to that. And, whether it's losing a loved one, a breakup, an injury. And I just want to, for you, what role can the mountains and the outdoors play in our journey to recovery?
I think for me, it's space, like not physical space, but it can be space to, in terms of grief, like working through that grief, or actually just kind of leaving it all behind. And I think for me, that was more the case when I set out on the bikepacking trips, and early on in my grief, my world really seemed to revolve around losing Ryan. And that was just like my whole world. Everything I experienced was kind of through the lens of loss. And so being out in the mountains and bikepacking and being away on adventures was kind of that opportunity to be honest, kind of have a mental break from that and engage with the world and with myself in a different way. And I think that was really healthy for me, and it allowed me to kind of return to, like real life with a better capacity to work through some of those really tough times. So I think, yeah, just space. And certainly while I was out bikepacking, there were moments where I was a lot more like actively, processing something, but a lot of the time it was just kind of that blank canvas to free my mind a little bit and engage with the world in a different way.
Great. Thanks for that, Sarah. And I want to pass it over to Colleen with that same question. So Colleen, again, we all, as you we all face grief at different times in our lives, and none of us are immune to that. And so I would love to just get your thoughts and on, the role that the mountains and outdoors can play in our recovery when we're experiencing grief.
Yeah, some people have even called climbing a mountain to be a similar process to going through grief, and that it's sort of one step at a time, and at times it feels just totally overwhelming and exhausting. And sometimes you have a mountain guide or somebody that's been up that mountain before to lead you along the way through the path of trying to get through the grief. And it's kind of a journey of getting to the top so you can almost, honor the loved one that you've lost and enjoy life again when you get to the top of the mountain. I remember myself when my father died, one of the first things I did was actually go outside and sit in the garden and cry and weed the garden. And it was like November, but it was such a relief just to be out in nature. And I think connecting with plants and animals and even people outside provide you something that you don't get inside. You stay too stuck in your own head. So I think it's really nice to hear these stories about people that have sort of found themselves in nature. And grief is one of those things that it seems natural because things die in nature and then they're reborn again in the spring. So thank you.
Great. Thanks for that, Colleen. Yeah, I think probably, everyone or a lot of people who are on this panel in some way, shape, or form of experience of grief have just almost naturally gone. It's like our body's kind of being almost maybe even times called to get outdoors and to have that quiet and silence. So yeah, thanks, Sarah and Colleen, for sharing that. I want to talk. So this is for Harvey and Patrick here. So, and again, anyone can jump in after, but so injury, our mental health when we're, again, climbing that mountain on the run, on this amazing trip or this expedition, in those times it can be, it's hard, but it's easy in a way. It has its own challenges, but it can be easy as far as, we have our passion, our focus. So, when it comes to the times when you're not, on that run or up climbing that mountain, or when it comes to the injury and setback, it's during these times when our mental health can be impacted most. And so how do you support your mental health during these times? So to repeat that a little bit, like during injury and setback, and when you're not on that adventure, how do you support your mental health during these times? So we'll start with Harvey, then we'll go to Patrick.
Yeah, I to be honest, I don't know. That's where I'm probably struggling the most. This year was brutal for me, and I did not, or I should say, I didn't have the skills available to me at the time to handle what came my way when it did. And it was interesting to see because when, I went through a a horrible relapse in the spring, and was very unhealthy. And then through the summer, I had been climbing, and had reached some of the, highest points in my life physically and with people making the film. And I had such a single focus towards those climbing objectives and the goals, that, like you said, it was hard work, but it was easy in a sense of, it was pretty simple. You get yourself to the base of a route and you climb up it, and you do the things you need to do to make sure you can do that. But when COVID happened and things fell away in the spring, and then when the film was wrapped, I completely disintegrated, and I really had no, I didn't know how to take care of myself. And I'm still learning that, because you can't just be climbing all the time. One thing though that, and a lot's changed for me this year. I went to a treatment center in the fall, and then since then I've been out with my family in Ontario, and my life right now is actually just completely different from what it was when I was looking at, when I watched the film. There's hardly a resemblance of the character that was in the movie. Well, maybe that's exaggerating a bit, but physically, mentally, it's been a tough time, and I haven't been training, and I haven't been doing these things that I normally can get myself to do to sort of stay healthy. I've been pretty low, and some days it's hard to get out of bed. But the one thing that I've been doing, when I can hear my head going to those places, or I get those dark thoughts, I've just started practicing, radical self-love and acceptance. I repeat the mantra, I love you, Harvey. I love you, Harvey, as much as I can. And even if I don't believe myself that I'm saying it, I just repeat it. And, that silences the other mantra that's going on in your head that's saying, why can't you get this done? Or you're screwing up your life, or this or that, So I think that one of the reasons why I fall into using drugs and alcohol is, just a need for acceptance, and the seeking of love and connection. And by kind of giving myself back by just outwardly saying I love you over and over, I think is maybe tricking my brain a little bit into getting what it needs, because really you have to provide yourself with that sense of love and acceptance. You of course can get it from outside of you, but you really gotta, kind of reflect that back onto yourself. And when I can't do anything else, when I can't, stay motivated to train or do pull-ups, or, when I can't do anything except eat a liter of ice cream on the couch, I just tell myself I love myself. Because you gotta love yourself no matter what, no matter how many, mistakes you made, or how many things you burned down, or how much weight you gained, or whatever it is, you know. You gotta love yourself, and loving yourself is a practice. It's like what I was saying earlier. It's easy to do when things are nice, but it's hard to do when things are messy. So keep practicing it, you know.
Awesome, man. Thanks for that, Harvey. That's yeah, it's gonna, hopefully we'll get to another question that kind of finishes where you ended up there. Patrick, yeah, just love to hear from you a bit about you know, how do you support your mental health during those times?
That was beautiful, Harvey. It's tough. Last year was really, really tough. I've sort of built a lot of my mental health around running, racing, you know, running ultra marathons, you know, every month or whatever, all year for several years. And so when everything was canceled last year, the first half of the year, I really didn't train a whole lot. I found it hard to get motivated, and yeah, I struggled a lot with that. When I finally signed up for some virtual races. Well, and on top of that, I also I do a lot of physical therapy between, you know, different massage and body work that I do for musculoskeletal issues, and then just training that I cross-training, physical training, and pretty much all that was cut out for the first half of, you know, for most of last year. And that impacts me a lot physically and then ultimately mentally. And so it was a really tough year. And then I finally kind of forced myself to really start pushing it in the summer, and then injured my knee and wound up having surgery. And so the whole second half of the year was pretty much, you know, just not even being able to walk, much less, you know, really do much athletic wise. And so it was really tough. It's definitely a struggle, losing sort of that you know, activity that you use to sort of cope with a lot of those things. And it's just the time and the focus that you spend on it. For me, I wind up trying to occupy my time doing, you know, focusing on work, focusing on, you know, other activities, things like that. Harvey definitely hit on probably the single biggest thing in you know, just the positive attitude, the positive sort of mental outlook. You know, however you sort of, you know, tell yourself you love yourself, or think positively, or just sort of, you know, focus on the positive, you know, the things in the future that you can look forward to, or whatever. I mean, I've definitely, I'm not even running, you know, more than 10 miles right now, and I'm signed up for 100Ks and 100 milers later this year. Right? So, you know, whether they happen or not, I'm certainly, you know, looking at them like I'm going to go and do my best to be there and try to make them happen. I'll definitely say the community, and we talked about it earlier, the community that I've got around me of people who, you know, on any given day, one of them's doing something incredible. And so it's a little bit motivating and inspiring to see, you know, those people out there when I can't actually do it myself. You know, I've sort of, you know, found inspiration in watching and supporting them. And then, you know, you know, in the same vein of the sort of positive thought, you know, one of the themes of what kind of has gotten me sort of going again and push the distances and push the limits of what I can do has always been sort of this idea of momentum, or I call it human inertia, which is sort of, you know, when you're going in a positive direction, it's really easy to keep adding a little bit more and a little bit more and keep pushing it and building momentum in that direction. And then when you're stopped, which is, you know, where I was for a lot of time, it seems almost impossible that you're going to sort of move, you know, any other direction from that. But it really just takes that little bit of sort of momentum and a push and a little bit of a different direction. And so I try to keep that in the back of my mind when, you know, I know right now I'm basically stopped, but I know it only takes, you know, that little bit of effort in one direction, and then, you know, just sort of building on that day after day. And, you know, like I said, I'm planning on running 100-miler at UTMB later this year. So it's just a matter of thinking positively, and, you know, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, but it's just, you know, you rechart the course at that point and you figure out the next plan.
Awesome, Patrick. Thanks for that. Yeah, that was great. So just want to have, we're getting closer kind of to the, a little bit to the end here, but I want to ask one more question, and then we're going to kind of leave some things for some closing thoughts, and then we're going to go to questions that people may have. But it was kind of to, you know, touched on at the end with Harvey there, and Patrick as well. But, you know, it's like, it's about, you know, we often don't pay attention to our mental health until it becomes a larger issue. You know, it's like when things are great, you know, we can just like, we're just going, and it's, you know, at those times is, you know, arguably when we actually, you know, should be investing our time into our mental health. And so I want to just, this next question is for Colleen, and it's just, what proactive steps can we take when we're feeling good and having energy? So after Colleen answers, anyone can jump in, but you know, Colleen, when we are feeling good and when we have the energy, what proactive steps can we take for our mental health?
Great question, because there's a lot of things that we can do when we're feeling good to prepare for the times that we're not going to be feeling good. Like learning some relaxation techniques like mindfulness, meditation, yoga, Tai Chi. All of those things are going to help us through the rest of our lives. Learning a new sport, one that you can do when you're injured, whether it's upper body or lower body, something you can do the rest of your life. Because, you know, as you get old, it's not easy to be able to do some of these adventure sports that you young people can do. The other important thing is to develop a support system. And I think, you know, all of you have done things together with other people. And that's something that sometimes is hard to find. But, you know, you've got friends, you've got relatives, you've got neighbors, but there's other people in your life that can be part of your support system, whether it's your doctor, your dentist, your dental hygienist, your banker, your hairdresser, your financial advisor, your accountant, your massage therapist, your physiotherapist, your beautician, whoever that you encounter, you know, in your life, even the store clerk where you go every week at the same time to chat with that person, becomes somebody important in your life over time. And so if you don't have enough people, maybe join a group, join a club, talk to new neighbors, reach out. I think, I don't want to give too much away from Crux, but one of the main themes at the very end is to reach out and check in with each other to find out how your friends and your close people are doing. Because a lot of people have been alone this last year, and it's been terrible for mental health, and mental health issues are just getting worse over time. And then I just want to reinforce what Harvey said about the shame and the embarrassment about asking for help and talking about what's going on inside. And when you're feeling better, maybe that's the time to actually get involved in some therapy, to talk about what's happened in your past, in your life, and help you be more fulfilled in life. Maybe you will find out that there is something there that can be treated that has been missed for years and years. Because some psychiatric problems, they're very hard to diagnose. So I would encourage people to, be more proactive when you're feeling well. Just don't forget it, because often people go for therapy for a few sessions when they're feeling miserable, and then as soon as they're a little bit better, they stop. So I could say a whole lot more, but I know we're running out of time. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for that, Colleen. And yes, that was great. And I'd love to spend a bit more time on that. And you can, if there's anything, I'm going to pass it over for right now for closing thoughts. And so if there's anything else that comes to your mind there, Colleen, feel free to share. So, and we'll start with Sarah here. And Sarah, again, so closing thoughts, but again, with the question of knowing what you've learned, what advice would you give your younger self? And then beyond that, just any closing thoughts. But if there's any, is there any advice, and it can be either or, any advice you'd give your younger self, or just any closing thoughts?
I really would have to think more on the advice one, to be honest. I think maybe it would be not to expect to know everything and have life figured out by your mid-30s. That, you know, this is just a work in progress and probably always will be. So kind of accepting that. Yeah, closing thoughts. Colleen had touched on therapy and counseling, and I guess I just wanted to really quickly say something about that, because it was a huge part of my journey, was counseling, and I relied really heavily upon that. In the early days of my grief, I sought a counselor more just to be proactive. I think I was still very much in shock, but felt like that was something I should do. And it, I think, turned out to be probably the best decision I made for myself. It did take me a little trial and error to find a counselor I connected with, but once I did, that has been a huge part of my journey and something I'm really thankful for. So beyond that, just a huge thanks to everybody and to my fellow panelists. You guys are super inspiring, and yeah, I can't wait to keep watching and seeing what you guys get up to.
Thanks, Sarah. Really appreciate that. Patrick, over to you. So either and or what, any advice you'd give to your younger self, or any closing thoughts?
You know, I think the younger self, I think it's already been hit by Harvey and Colleen, but I mean, one of the biggest things for me was the shame of what I was doing and hiding. And, you know, if I had dealt with it 5 years earlier, it may have been a completely different set of circumstances that I wound up in, right? And so just acknowledging, you know, I think I'm very open about it now because, you know, I feel like it's probably something I should have been open about earlier, and I wish that I had. So if there's one thing I would tell my younger self, is probably that, you know, don't be afraid to admit your mistakes, and you know, just talk about them with the people around you, because that was probably the biggest mistake I think I made.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. Over to Harvey.
Yeah, learn to be as fragile as you are strong, and start rock climbing as soon as you can. Wish I didn't start when I was 28.
Yeah, only rock climbing. Rock climbing is the one.
I don't know, man.
Yeah, no, that's great, Harvey. That was awesome. Colleen, any advice for your younger self, or any last closing thoughts?
That's a tough one, because if I changed anything, then I wouldn't be the person who I am today. And I'm okay with who I am now, even though I've made a lot of mistakes along the way too. I think I would probably say to myself, don't be so anxious, which I'm still anxious about. And hopefully by tomorrow it'll all be gone. But, you know, we get upset about things that don't mean a thing when you look back on it, you know, later. So yeah, enjoy life and don't worry. Be happy.
Amazing.
Nice.
Thanks, Colleen. So we're gonna, just before we end here, we definitely want to do a bit of a Q&A, and then I'll just close with saying a few words after that. So, you know, 10-ish minutes. So everyone, I know we're a little bit over. Everyone, if you could stick around just for, you know, 10 or 15 extra minutes here, and we'll present some questions here for the panel. So question that I have here. So from Charlotte, I'd like to touch on the idea that we are addicted at some level to these outdoor pursuits we love. For panelists who have found comfort in the outdoors during their struggles and the recovery from addiction. How do you view this? So I can say that one more time. I'd like to touch on the idea that we are addicted at some level to these outdoor pursuits that we love. For the panelists who have found comfort in the outdoors during their struggles and recovery from addiction, how do you view this?
I'm actually reading a book right now that's quite interesting called The Biology of Desire. And it talks about basically how the brain learns. And the brain learns through rewards and outcomes and having goals motivated towards those things. So it's interesting because in this book, the model of addiction, they're trying to move away from the model of addiction as being considered a disease, which is kind of how it's commonly referred to, because an addicted brain does have somewhat of a different structure than a non-addicted brain. And so anytime an organ is different from one that's quote unquote normal, it's, well, I guess you would call it a disease. But what happens is by becoming addicted, the brain is actually only, it's learning in the exact same way it's intended to and working the way it has been designed to, just with an unintended negative consequence. So I think addiction itself isn't, you know, it's the exact same sort of chemicals that happen when we're in love, or the same sort of chemicals that happen and neurological processes that a parent needs to stay attached to their child, you know, and or a climber to their sport or activity. So it's, I think the one, I don't know if I would classify though my relationship with climbing as an addiction, because I think addiction specifically relates to something that has an unintended negative consequence. So I suppose it could be an addiction if, you know, you were losing relationships over it, or it was affecting you financially, or some of those things. But if it's just something that you love doing and doing it all the time, even obsessively, I don't know if I would put it into the category of addiction. I hope that answers things.
Yeah, great. That's great, Harvey. Patrick or Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think the common assumption is that I went straight from addiction into ultra running, and it's not really the case. I was sort of a 5-year gap where I was, or I don't even know the number of years, but there was a significant gap where I had sort of stopped using the drugs and abusing the drugs, and was finding I was really still unhappy. And it was sort of the ultra running that is what opened you know, new doors or new paths to happiness for me. And so I don't disagree that it's somewhat of an addiction, although I agree with Harvey's sentiment on it that, you know, seeking, you know, what your brain finds rewarding doesn't necessarily inherently mean an addiction, I guess. The other component for me is there's definitely a physical therapeutical aspect for me where for whatever reason, it sort of helps resolve a lot of physical musculoskeletal issues that I have when I run these crazy long distances. And so it's certainly, for me, it's definitely a mental therapy, but it's also a physical therapy in a lot of ways. And so I don't necessarily view it as an addiction. A little bit, I sort of see it as a blessing and a curse. Like it's something that I kind of have to do to make my body feel like it's not, you know, uncomfortable all the time. But when I stop doing it, I'm uncomfortable. But when I do it, you know, I get the benefit of being mentally and spiritually rewarded as well.
Thanks, Patrick. Sarah, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I would agree with both Patrick and Harvey. I don't necessarily say that I feel a sense of addiction, but I do absolutely acknowledge that for me, particularly in grief and harder times, that there is a lot of like mental therapy wrapped up into being out in the mountains and bike packing and cycling. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Thanks. Thanks all three of you. And for Charlotte, I hope that answered your question in some way. And yeah. So moving on, and this question is for Colleen. So Colleen from Brandon. I work with kids with autism and mental health disorders. They don't want to express themselves or share their experiences. I primarily ski and hike with them. What are some activities or exercises I can do with them to open up in nature and try and help them? So I can repeat, would you like me to repeat the question again?
It sounds like Brandon has got more experience with autism than I do, but it sounds like he's already doing the right kinds of things, trying different activities, connecting with, if there's a chance, plants and animals. Smells are also good for different areas of the brain. I'm not an expert in autism, but I think being in nature helps everybody, no matter what their problems are. So I can't imagine it could do any harm. I don't know if anybody else on the panel has any thoughts or experience with autism.
I do not.
I do not.
Yeah, if they're two, it's it is something that if there are any things that people are curious about afterwards, and perhaps sending an email and trying to helping to find those answers for you here, if we can't, or sorry, those answers for you after, if we can't answer them here. Just want to say something that was shared. So the book Spark by John, so this was shared in the chat. The book Spark by John Rady, MD, has a whole chapter on exercise and rehab / addictions, which is key for health. Excellent book for exercise for all areas of life, from dementia, mental health, IQ, ADHD, etc. So yeah, the book Spark by John Rady. And so this is, we'll be wrapping up here pretty soon, just one or two more questions. So any thoughts on getting yourself out there when you're not your best mentally, especially this year when we're not necessarily meeting other people, as that's usually the big motivator, knowing you'll feel better once you're out there, but getting there is sometimes tougher. So again, any thoughts on getting yourself out there when you're not at your best mentally? So anyone have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I hate to run the first 5 miles, no matter if I'm mentally happy or not. So, I mean, it's always a struggle for me to get out to do the first few, steps of any run. It's not. It probably sounds funny, but it's not really like I love running that much.
I think that's a good question, because as I was saying, my life has changed a lot. I haven't been in a climbing gym for 4 months or done any exercise or really anything. And I think that my climbing season this year is going to look a lot different than last year's. I feel pretty mentally fragile. So I don't know how much I'll be charging it on lead or what objectives I'll be choosing. So my advice would be, whatever activity is you're doing, maybe just dial back the intensity of it a little bit and be okay with it. Like, this summer, if all I can do is climb 5'7", then I'll just climb 5'7" all summer. And if I can only do it for a couple hours, you know, that's what I'll do. But then once I'm there, I'll probably actually be pretty psyched and see another harder pitch and be like, oh yeah, maybe we should try that, you know, like, because you get yourself to the venue and I think you've done half the work. That's actually kind of what happened this summer was when we were filming. I mean, I was a wreck through March and April, and then had to start going climbing all summer. And I was like, you know, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do half the stuff I'm going to be able to do. Like, I've just been doing blow in my apartment alone for 60 days. So I wasn't sure how it was going to go. But once I got there, you know, I slowly but surely got everything back, but I just had to start small. So just pick something chill and bring yourself out there.
Yeah, I think what Harvey said there with starting small, I can relate to as well. I have not done very much in the last year either, and that's been a struggle and beating myself up about that. But just finding what it is that I love about being out and on my bike, and you know, then experiencing that maybe like on a micro level. So that might be like riding 5K from home and sleeping out under the stars, and coming back in the morning. It might not be a big adventure, but you know, dialing it back and just getting a small taste of it, sometimes I find that just gets the ball rolling and can be enough to give me that, you know, little boost.
Yeah, I was going to say, I joke about not liking running, but I ran the first mile I was able to run about a month ago, you know, for the first time in 4 or 5 months. So, you know, it really is finding the little simple joy and, you know, what got you into it in the first place.
Awesome. Thanks so much. So we're going to have to end it there. We're 16 minutes over the hour. And I want to give a huge, huge thank you to Sarah, to Harvey, to Patrick, to Colleen for, you know, sharing your thoughts, your insights, your wisdom, and, you know, and most of all, just being vulnerable and willing to kind of share your story and, you know, what you're putting out in the world. And, you know, so it is truly a gift. And I thank you. You know, it was amazing to watch all 3 of your films, and, you know, it has a huge impact putting that out in the world and sharing your story. So thanks again for doing what you do. Want to quickly just mention, if there's a donation link for Worth Hats Counseling Fund in the chat. So again, the mission behind Worth Hats is to help break the stigma around counseling therapy and helping pay for those who would otherwise be unable to afford. So there's a donation link in the chat if you choose. And at the very least, go on to the Worth site and just read the Worth story. It is a longer story, and I just only shared a little bit of it there. So it's worthhats.com. And want to thank VIMFF again for putting this discussion together. It's incredibly impactful, and it brings me a lot of joy to know that this is where mental health is moving. And I think, you know, tonight is an example of just a really positive step in the mental health discussion, and to taking a step to breaking down that stigma. And so want to thanks again to the generous festival sponsors, Arc'teryx and Creative BC. And lastly, I want to say, go out and enjoy the festival. So there's over 50 films from around the world. You know, you have over a month to watch all these films. So let it be a great month. Let it inspire you. Let it you know, think and let your imagination go wild. And we also have 2 more engaging panel discussions and interactive workshops. So keep your eye on the VIMFF website for more information on different things, and go out, enjoy the films, especially the 3 films that we have from the stars of it here, which is Crux with Harvey Wright, Sarah with Choosing to Live, and with Patrick, Confessions of a Runner. So go out, watch those films, and I think it'll just give you that much more insight after hearing this panel, and to kind of understand who the people are behind the film. So thanks again to Harvey, Sarah, Patrick, and Colleen. Really, really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who tuned in and was here for this panel and part of this discussion.